Pues que manda.
Descendants of the Powhatan Indians. And what they said is they were watching Smith as he did all his traveling and trying to find the rivers. And they decided that they needed to, Wakahanasal decided he needed to make Smith a son and chief of the English tribe, because he knew that Smith and them had these weapons, and he wanted some of those weapons. He also wanted to use them to protect them against the Spaniards coming here, because they had the cannons and stuff. Smith, being the well-known negotiator he was at this point, decided he would give Wakahanasal some weapons. So, if you saw the movies, there's 3 movies out there. There's 2 cartoons and a movie made by Lionsgate called The New World. And the one in Lionsgate, they actually show him coming to the shore with chains around him. He was held in chains as he came here. The other one, movies, tells you about the experiences that he wrote the story about Pocahontas after Pocahontas died. Okay, and we'll come to that later. So what happens is, I need to rush through this, I don't want to take most of the time. What happens is, Smith was appointed chief of the English tribe. Pocahontas and the Braves come back here to the fort. Well, these people here are squabbling over the food because nobody's doing any work in here, right? And so what happens, Smith is bringing food back, establishing a relationship with the Indians, and he gets here and he's supposed to send weapons back to Wakahanasal. What Smith does, in the book that I was telling you about, he pulls one of these cannons up here, fires it in the woods, scares the living daylights out of the Braves to go running off back to Werowocomoco, which is headquarters across the York River, and no weapons. But the relationship with the Indians had improved. They were constantly able to trade stuff and do all of that. Smith went off and do all of these things that he was going to do as far as trying to find the Pacific Ocean and stuff. He comes back here after getting bit by the stingray. He gets back here in September of 1608. When he got back here, they had already replaced Winfield with a guy named Radcliffe as the president of the colony. They didn't like Radcliffe either. And so what happens is Smith came in here and he started seeing they were stealing the food out of the storehouse. The gentleman wasn't doing any work and stuff. So he put in place an edict that no work, no food. And he also had half of them had died from trying to drink the rum mixture with the brackish water here, and it didn't work. So he had to dig a well. You're going to hear about the well over here, because that's where they use it as a trash can. You can find a lot of artifacts they pull out of the well and stuff. So he was elected president of the colony. He was only president 2 weeks, and guess who shows up? Newport shows up. Newport shows up with the goldsmith, with the glassmakers, and the other folks, because the people in England saying, where's the return on the money? All you brought back from us is harsh tobacco and lumber, which was valuable, and some, other commodities, but no gold, because what they brought back, what they dug up here was pyrite. Fool's gold. So they come back here, he gets with Smith, understands Smith has a relationship with Wakahanasal, and said, hey, the chief knows where the gold is. Let's go over to Werowocomoco, me and you, Smith, and we will meet with the Wakahanasal and find out where the gold is. Now you look at the traditional Powhatan Indian at the time frame. He's wearing pearls around his neck because they got a lot of oysters out here. He has pearls. They have no metal. Their tools are made out of stone. Their arrows are made out of slate, and there's no metal. They got glass beads that the English had traded for food with them, and that's it. There's no metal. There's not even iron ore here. There's nothing. So he goes over there and meets with Wakahanasal, bearing gifts to him, trying to find out where the gold is. Well, Wakahanasal is now upset with Smith because Smith didn't deliver the weapons that he promised to deliver. So the other story is that in the middle of the night, the princes run through the woods after they find out there's no gold, and goes to the camp where the English are and tells Smith that her father is upset with him and is going to kill him. Right? Well, she's still a young girl. You think she's going to be running through the woods in the middle of the night? I doubt it. But anyway, so that's the story that he also tells about Wakahanasaw and Pocahontas. So what happens here is they find out there's no gold. They come back here. Smith meets an accident here. It says that he had a gunpowder accident. Maybe somebody tried to kill him. But anyway, he eventually goes back to England, never to return again. He leaves here in early part of 1609. What happens in 1609, 1610, you're going to find out over there, it's called a starving time. Why is it starving time? Because the Indians are upset. They had them trapped in that fort there. They eat anything they could have in that fort. Their dogs, their rats, and one guy says each other in there. And they did that up until, and because this was the biggest drought area. The guy came out here, they were raiding the Indian villages and take the food that the Indians had, and the Indians were struggling too because of the drought here. So they kept them captive in there, and in June 17, 1610, the Indians had left. The Indians had felt that they were all dead because you're going to see a lot of graves over there and stuff. So the Indians left. So I guess somebody must have peeked outside of the fort and seen there was no Indians. And it had a boat there, and it was being captained by a guy named Thomas Gate. They got on that ship. They head down the James River, lost colony number 2. They get down to the James River and they meet a flotilla that was coming in from England. There's a book called The Shipwreck That Saved the Colony. And on that ship was a guy named Delaware. Lord Delaware came in here and stopped them and turned them around and reestablished the fort here, set in martial law and everything. And they celebrate that here every year, his arrival here at in the town. Now, Smith is over in England. They come in here. The relationship with the Indians is still bad. So how are they going to improve the relationships with the Indians, protect the settlers here? They decided we'll kidnap the princess. So that's what they do. In 1613 or so, they decided to kidnap Pocahontas. Now, the English tell one way they did it. The Indian oral history tells a different way. What happens is, whatever happened, it happened up in the Potomac River area because Pocahontas then was married to a brave up there. And they went up there and they convinced the chief up there and his wife, according to English, to bring her onto a ship that Arago was piloting and brought her back down here. The Indian folklore said they went up there, they raided the village, killed her husband, and brought her back here. Regardless of what happened, she was brought back here. She was held hostage. She wasn't brought back to the fort. She was brought back to Henrico County, as we know today, and given to a guy named Thomas Dale, who trained her in the English ways, dressed her in the English ways, and they baptized her and renamed her Rebecca. Well, on this ship that I told you about, the shipwreck that saved the colony, came a young little man called, he was Johnny Appleseed, you know? He's the guy with the tobacco seeds. His name is John Rolfe. John Rolfe came back here with tobacco seeds he acquired from the Caribbean islands. And because the English, who were all hooked on nicotine at the time frame, did not like the harsh Indian tobacco. And he came back here and he crossbreeded and made a milder to Walter Raleigh and John Rolfe tobacco, right? And he fell in love with the princess. And he asked permission to marry the princess because he had lost his wife on the voyage coming over here. And he marries Pocahontas. When he marries Pocahontas, he marries her in the church that's right in front of this church right here. They found it 2 years ago. The church chancellor area is right over there. You'll see it over there. They got married there. And so what happens is when they got married there, Wakahanasaw didn't come to the wedding, but he sent emissaries there for the wedding. And peace became, because he was married to to Pocahontas. Pocahontas plays a major role in saving the colony because while she was married to Rolfe, and while she was captured there, Wakanahanasaw was not going to attack. Okay, so that's how importance of Pocahontas as far as the color here. So Rolfe marries her. He grows his tobacco. He packs it up on his ship, and they go over to England around the same time that Mr. John Smith is in England, right? However, Smith in 1614 made a voyage up to New England. He actually mapped out the route the Pilgrims used to go to New England, to Plymouth Rock. And he came back with a successful voyage and brought back a lot of stuff that he was able to trade and bring back to England. And he decided to do it again. Now, there's writing saying Pocahontas and him were there at the same time frame, and he met with Pocahontas. Don't know if that happened. But anyway, in 1615, Smith decided to go back out into the Atlantic Ocean on his way to New England, and guess what happened to him? He's captured by pirates. Okay? And the illustration book you see it, he escapes that, the pirates meet peril, and he's rowboating his way back to England. You got to see the book. You can look at it in the kids section over in the bookstore. So anyway, he goes back to England after that, and never to return. He sits back and he writes all these stories. Pocahontas, on her return visit after meeting with the king in the royal court with Smith over there, dies in England. She's buried in England in around 1616. And Rolfe comes back here without a son and stuff. And so all of this is basically in place now. The colony is in place. The relationship with the Indians are good because of the marriage between Pocahontas and Rolfe and stuff. So everything is well until Wakanahanasaw dies. When Wakanahanasaw dies, guess what's his brother's name? Opeloncanough. He's the guy that didn't like the British because he thought the British was here to take away the land. So what he did, he tried to massacre. He killed over a third of them in his first attempt. Second attempt, he got captured and he was assassinated himself. Okay, and then that's basically what happened here until English law was started here. And then in that church right there that you see, now these monuments here, this was built in 1907. That was the church called a memorial church built in 1907. However, that church is built over top of the 1617 foundation. You can walk around the church and see the plexiglass, look on the plexiglass and see the foundation of the 1617 church. That is where the House of Burgesses started, right there in that church. So, this is the beginning of America. Okay, now I talked about Gastineau being, I consider the father of America because he's the one who put this whole thing together to come over here. And they actually have his bones up in the Smithsonian. They dug it up, they got a marking where his grave was, because there's a writing, because he only died 3 months after he got here. And they had some military ceremony burying him, and it's written down in books. And they recognized that he was buried in a sort of raw type of way, and so they believed that that's his body. And they took it up to the Smithsonian and marked the grave there. So basically, he was the reason they came back here. It's because he put together the Virginia Company of London and established the efforts to come back here. So what you have here is the beginning of America. Our language is here. We all speak English. Basically, our laws are based upon English laws and stuff. And our representative government started right there in that church. Okay? And basically, our commerce started here because this was an entrepreneurial venture. What is our land based upon? It's capitalism, entrepreneurialism. All of that began here. What also began here was slavery. Because, I'll go back to Nevis and Devil's Island. The British, being hungry for gold and stuff, were not successful in finding gold here. So there was 3 little Spanish ships floating out in the Caribbean Sea. And what they did, they attacked it. Pirate ships attacked it, thinking they were going to find gold and silver. You know what they found? They found slaves. And what they did, they took the healthiest slaves out of there, and they brought them up here. And in 1619, the first slaves under English law came right here to this island. Now the question is whether or not they were slaves or indentured servants. But regardless of what happens is English law changed, made all the Africans and all the Native American slaves here. to grow the tobacco of Virginia. The biggest problem with today's, with the laws in Virginia is that anyone who claims they're Native American cannot really prove it, because the laws of segregated Virginia placed both the Africans and the Indians all into one race, color. And so, as a result of that, the U.S. government, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, do not recognize the Indians of Virginia. Only the state of Virginia recognizes those who say they are tribal members of an Indian tribe. So they get no support from the federal government under the Bureau of Indian Affairs, because they cannot prove, maybe later on with DNA they might be able to do it, they cannot prove either whether or not they're Indian or Africans, because they're so, mixed breed and stuff. One other thing I'm going to tell you about has nothing to do with the English here. It has something to do with the graves in the back of that church there. This land here was acquired, the land from that gate there all the way over to the Arcarian belongs to the APVA. It's the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities. They acquired that land because they were an organization that was trying to preserve historical sites within Virginia. And they knew that this was a hollow land here. And the only thing that's above this ground here that is from the 1600 is the church tower in front of this church. It's from the 1640 church. Okay? And they wanted to protect that, so they went to the owners of the land here. The owners had changed hands a number of times, but in the late 1880s belonged to the Barney family. And they were out of Ohio. They convinced Mr. Barney to donate that land. The way they convinced him, a little arm twisting, but they convinced him to donate that land, and he basically donated the land at 22 acres to the APVA, and it belongs to them. Not until the National Park Service was established in the 1930s did the National Park come in and address Mrs. Barney, because Mr. Barney had died, and acquired the rest of the land. So the rest of the island belongs to the National Park Service. The National Park Service did archaeological digs all the way through here, excluding up until the church, basically. And then Mrs. Bagley, who was the head of the APVA, did not trust the federal government nor the National Park Service to ask them to stop. So probably at that time, point frame, that's why they didn't find the fort. They didn't find the fort until 1990, when the APVA commissioned Dr. Kelso to do it for the 400th anniversary year. But anyway, up until that time frame, if you had came here like in the 50s or so, you met with the National Park ranger like myself. He said, well, this is Newtown. This is where they moved out of the fort and established the port here. This was the capital here, the fort. The river had widened, therefore the fort probably was consumed by the river. We don't know where the fort is, okay? And over there, the APVA will tell you about the church and tell you about the House of Burgesses and all that stuff over there, because they knew that stuff. Well, there happened to be a caretaker there. His name was Sam Robinson. And Sam Robinson listened to all of these different stories that these people were telling about this location, so he decided to come up with his own story also. So back in the back behind the church there is the graves of a family called the Benjamin Harrison family. Now, the Benjamin Harrison family was a very prominent family here in Virginia. They had a young daughter named Sarah. And there was a guy named James Blair, who is the founder of William & Mary. He was a rector, Episcopalian priest. And he fell in love with Sarah. Asked permission to marry Sarah. Well, he was a quite older gentleman, and Sarah was a young maiden. And the mother-in-law said, absolutely not. You're not going to marry my young daughter. Not as long as I live. Well, unfortunately, the Benjamin Harrison, the mother and father, met tragedy along Route 5 over here and died, and Sarah was still living. She went ahead and married James Blair. She died before Mr. Blair did, and they buried her over there, next to her family. And then Mr. Blair died, and they buried him next to his wife. It just so happened a tree grew up between the two graves. Okay? And this is a copy of the thing. There was a sycamore tree that grew up between the graves. And so this guy named James Robinson, Sam Robinson, made up the story and told the story to visitors here that was the mother-in-law tree. Because even in death, she was able to separate them. And he told that story to the Queen's mother, Queen Elizabeth, we know today. He told it to the Queen Mother. So the Queen Mother told Elizabeth, when you all go over there to Jamestown in the 50s, right? Stop by and see this man named Sam Robinson. He has an interesting story to tell you. And that's a picture of Sam Robinson telling Prince Philip, the governor of Virginia, and a whole bunch of other dignitaries and Queen Elizabeth about the mother-in-law tree. Now the thing is blown down and reset the graves. But this is the whole story, and this is the actual story he told. Mr. Robinson was from the Caribbean islands, so his dialect was a little thick. But that's the story he told over there about those graves. Okay? And that's probably the end of my little story. I don't want to take up much more of your time. I appreciate you took the time to listen to me. And